Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all join us today. This is the 5th of 7 sessions for the Ocean Literacy Dialogues, 3rd edition. For those of you who are attending the first session, the Ocean Literacy Dialogues is an initiative that has been coordinated under the Ocean Literacy with All program that's led by IOC UNESCO. And the Ocean Literacy with All is a UN decade endorsed program. And the first edition of the Ocean Literacy Dialogues took place in Lisbon, Portugal, as part of the UN Ocean Conference. The second edition took place in October in Santos, Brazil, led by Ronaldo, who is probably still here in the room. There he is. And Canada has the privilege of hosting the third edition here in Vancouver at Impact 5. The Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, together with MARSOC, SCI, and I think Emily's here in the room, and the support of the Ocean Literacy with All community. So great to have you all here. And I'm going to turn it over to this fantastic team. And Jay Williams is the National Education Coordinator for the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, and she is going to be moderating tonight's session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diz. Good evening and welcome. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to facilitate this panel discussion, where we will hear from a diverse group of international experts and ocean literacy research community members. Each will bring their unique perspectives and lived experiences to the table. I'm certain that this discussion will provide a holistic view on the challenges and opportunities for creating a more inclusive and equitable ocean research community. Unfortunately, we were meant to have 6 chairs here today, and Michael Vague was unable to join us today due to his voice. It did not hold up for him over the course of this session or this summit. And granted, he had a very powerful message to share, and the work that he and his community have been carrying out for thousands, over 14,000 years, caring for, protecting and conserving the waterways and shorelines around the Helsik community and beyond, should not go unmentioned. So in that vein, I'd like to just give us a moment to recognize that there is someone missing from this conversation, and his message and his story is just as powerful and meaningful. What we're going to do tonight is have each of our esteemed guests introduce themselves once we move through the panel discussion session. They will each have about 5 minutes to share their perspectives and stories related to their research and the work that is underway. And we will have a question and answer period as well following the discussion, and not to forget our friends out in the World Wide Web that are broadcasting or joining in. And Mia, we see you, we acknowledge you, welcome. We're so happy you're here with us at a great distance with you up in Cambridge Bay. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, glad to see you here. And we have Dr. Francesca Santoro with us as well, and Dr. Yolanda Sanchez, and Kirsten Forsberg, and Dr. Asha DeVos, who is with us here tonight as well. And again, mentioning that Mia is online joining us. So without any further ado, I know they have very interesting stories to tell and perspectives to share. So I will pass the speaking stick over to our first speaker, Dr. Francesca Santoro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really, truly a pleasure to be part of this panel because the topic is really very dear to my heart. I've been doing some research on transdisciplinarity since I was doing my PhD many years ago. I'm not going to tell how many, but for me, is really a very important topic, especially now, because we are all talking about inclusiveness, because we're all talking about the fact that we need to have more perspective on board, but the question is how we do it. So my short talk is gonna really focus on how we do it and what's really the objectives of promoting more inclusiveness in ocean governance, ocean sustainability. I think I can't see very well my slide, so I think I will stand up. So I'm a senior program officer at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Ah, okay. So maybe there. I think here is the best. So as this said, I coordinate the Ocean Literacy with All program, which is an endorsed ocean decade program. And really, even starting from the name, aims to really engage as many people as possible. This is a sort of continuation from the previous IOC initiative on ocean literacy, which was called Ocean Literacy for All. But then we decided to change the name and go for Ocean Literacy with All, because it's really what we want to do over the next years. So next slide, please. So as you might know, transdisciplinarity is becoming a very fashionable word now, but very briefly, there are two streams in transdisciplinarity. One is really more related to epistemological discourse, philosophical discourse, and the other one is a more practical stream, which is really related to how we use science, how we engage stakeholders in science, and even how we produce science. So this is something that I'm going to talk in this brief presentation. So transdisciplinarity is going to be really key in how we move forward in the idea of a transformative ocean governance. So ocean governance is really something that is becoming more and more important for the society as a whole, but still we need to do a lot of work in terms of including more actors in this idea of promoting a transformative shift in ocean governance, especially when it comes to powers dynamics. And this is again something I'm gonna focus in this presentation. Next slide, please. So there are a number of challenges in really promoting ocean sustainability. And one of them, and we've been discussing this in these days and also even before when preparing this ocean literacy dialogues, that currently the understanding of the ocean is very much dominated by natural sciences. And so it's really good that these ocean dialogues are promoted also by the Marine Social Sciences Network, and Emma is a key representative here of that network. But actually ocean issues are people issues. So social sciences are really key in this topic. And also another issue, and I know Asha is a big advocate for this, is that published knowledge in ocean science is unevenly distributed around the world. So we still have to do a lot to fight again what Asha in a very beautiful article called parachute science. And also we have to do a lot in decolonizing ocean science. Also, the ocean is a global common, and that leads to a range of nested collected dilemmas. The relevance of the ocean and its resources is subject to great global geopolitical powers, and therefore there is a greatest need to open up our ways of defining ocean futures. You know, the motto of the Ocean Decade is to go from the ocean we have to the ocean we want. But what is this ocean we want? And we should, you know, open up discussions on these ocean futures. Next slide, please. So transdisciplinarity research really abandoned the idea of this traditional division of labor between the scientific community producing knowledge and the society using that knowledge. Actually, what we are trying to do and promote is the idea of co-production of knowledge. And in doing that, we want also to acknowledge the fact there are multiple ways of knowing the ocean. There are multiple values, and this is the basis to promote a multiple learning and creating trust among all the people that have to participate in this. What's this? In this endeavor. And we want to create safe spaces for knowledge co-production, and we want to be to be able to have those spaces where people can freely express their opinion, interests, and experiences. So next slide. So there are different ways of doing this co-production of knowledge. So in a nutshell, transdisciplinarity is really about including more actors in producing that knowledge that I was mentioning before. And this idea of co-production of knowledge really broadly seeks to connect researchers with diverse social actors to collaborative produce knowledge, actions, and societal change. The promise here is really compelling and is developing solutions through processes that are more legitimate, because those solutions are not coming from top down, but are developing collectively. But in order to make sure that people are able to participate in those processes, we need to, as we were discussing before with Nicola, not only provide knowledge, but we have to make sure that people are able to use that knowledge and able to effectively participate in participatory processes. I mean, a lot of environmental laws are calling for public participation, but are we really making sure that citizens, society at large, can participate in those processes in an effective way? So the idea of co-production of knowledge and different ways of doing this co-production of knowledge, I think can help us there. Next slide. So I just brought some examples of how we can do this type of initiatives. Of course, there can go from like really searching for practical solution to more empowering voices, brokering powers, and next slide, reframing powers and navigating differences and reframing agency. So the idea here is that the co-production efforts that have demonstrated over the years, and there's a big, research body on how we do co-production of knowledge, have shown that the ways in which we can do that, and that shows more effective results, is really when we create those spaces for bringing concrete solution, but most of all in doing that knowledge brokering that I was mentioning before. So I think the ocean literacy community has a role there in being this knowledge broker and in helping the wide society to be able to participate more effectively in those public participation processes. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Francesca, for getting us started off in a good way, highlighting some of the challenges as well as approaches to backfilling those gaps or addressing those challenges. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to hand the microphone over to Yolanda to continue our very thought-provoking discussion.
Thank you so much. So, what responsibility, to be here talking about that. So first of all, I just want to comment a little bit that how much difficult it is to speak about GI topics in such event like this that is so exclusive. So I really want to congratulate to the COLG team, because I know that the sessions from Ocean Literacy Dialogues have been the only ones that are open to the people from the street. So, and they also make the efforts with the Festival Ocean, so it makes a little bit more open all the science that are happening here. And I really appreciate that, at the same time that I appreciate that they bring me here. So I cannot do it on my own, like this is too expensive. And at the same time, I think that it's difficult to find the way to arrive and to how to get your position on that kind of situations. So I really want to thank, because I think it's some steps to focus on that topics. So Meg, please. I want just to share with you a little story about why I think that I'm here, because I have been thinking about that a lot. That's not my field, but this invited me, and for sure I have to accept it because I wanted to. But I did marine science in Spain, and then I realized that I wanted to move a little bit and looking for some different opportunities. So I moved to Chile and I spent there 9 years. So when I arrived to Chile, I have a lot of great enthusiasm and ideas that I wanted to implement. So I designed a marine educational program that works very well. So in some points, after 1 year and a half, someone from an NGO arrived and saw the project and asked me to develop the same project in Rapa Nui Island. So I was so happy. Everybody wants to go to Easter Island. So I say, yes, I can do it. So I have some conversations with some people from Rapa Nui, and I designed something with a team of people. And when I arrived to the island and I started to implement all the things that I have designed, I cannot tell you how much unsuccessful it was, that idea. So I was kind of sad because it was, I did my first experiment in education on Chile and it works. And I thought that it will be, works for everybody. So at the same time that I did that, and I said, like, if I am doing my things with my heart, with trying to do it well, trying to make it as well as I know, why the people don't like what I'm offering them or the program that I have designed? So it took me a while to understand that I never asked them what they want or what they need. So I know that maybe it's so simple, or maybe you can think that it's so simple to think about that, but how many times, especially in marine conservation and in marine protected areas, we decided what the people need for them. So after a while working with them, I was very lucky because I had the opportunity to restart the project. So I asked for the time enough to have all the conversations that I need to have with all the people from Rapa Nui to decide what they want from a marine educational project. So then we have a really good results. It was a project that was implemented for almost 1 year, but then I stopped to work then because, you know, sometimes when we create marine protected areas, the government signed this paper and then there is no more funding for the marine protected areas. So the project continued without the support of the NGO. So it was a work that now I'm happy and proud to say that we reached the goal we were looking for there. So Meg, please. What I have learned during that project, and I have tried to improve in the rest of the projects that I have been implementing in different marine protected areas where I have to work with people from that places, is something that I want to share with you. Is like how I try to implement all those JEDI ideas on marine educational programs. So first of all, listen all the time. So first of all, you need to have the time to listen. And most of the time it's not considered when we design a project, the time that we need to listen. It's not just going and have one talk. You need to knock on many doors. You need to go and talk with a lot of people and respect their times and stop to think like if you just go 3 days to the context or just with a couple of meetings, you will reach the goal. So you need to listen and write and share what you are proposing and listen again the feedback and have this time for design. So all the time thinking about this capacity exchange, like I have some tools on education, but the people that I'm going to work with, they have some tools on different education methodologies also, but from their context, how they understand their environmental everything. So to work on this exchange and stop to think about this old education word that we know, like I'm the teacher and I'm going to teach everybody. So try to work on this horizontal way of education. So knowledge beyond science is something that we have been talking already, but we all the time prepare, or I used to prepare those educational program using all the information, scientific research that we have. And I remember once I prepared a trivia. I don't know if that's a name in English also, trivia, like a question. So I have the number of eggs that a sea snail can, sea snail, caracol, okay, that sea snail have. So it was a trivia game, and it was the question. I have the answer from a research article published. And there was some woman from Rapa Nui that has been with this sea snail for many years, and she didn't trust the answer that was on the paper. And she said, I'm working with that animal for many years and I have counted the eggs many times. So your answer is not true. So for me, it was like, how amazing is to listen to that kind of people who really have understand that science is something, but local knowledge is something also different. And everything is on the same level. So to work on this knowledge, the language is also something that we have to learn, because I'm from Spain, but I have been working in Chile for many years. And even if we both speak Spanish, sometimes we misunderstood. So just imagine how much difficult it is when there are different languages. Try to work with multidisciplinary professionals who give you different points of view about what you are trying to design. And think about the time all the time. The time is what I was talking before, like you need to think that it's not just to go into the marine protected area or the place that you are going to work just for implement the idea. You have to have the time before and you have to have the time after to evaluate also what you have done. So try to figure out how much time you need for your programs. And also all the time trying to empower and promote the leadership on that marine educational programs, because that will help them to increase their voice. So I think that that's the point when we share this possibility of, for example, the young people that I have been worked with, to let them know that they can be on that kind of conference, for example, that promotes on there some different abilities to communicate to the community what they know and involve them to continue making marine conservation. So this support is absolutely necessary, and networking to share all these ideas. So Meg, please, I just want to introduce a little bit about Relato, that is a Latin American Marine Educators Network that has been created with the idea of exchange those learnings, because those are my learnings, but I'm sure that many of you have different learnings about how to include Jedi. So one of the things that we made with Relato, it was to create the first Marine Educators Conference, that it is on the next slide. So it was for free, it was online, and the only thing that we asked to the people to participate in the conference, there were 500 people participating. It was to answer a survey where we wanted to know, because we wanted to create a report to understand a little bit more what the people think about marine education in Latin America. So in the next slide, this is the report. It's available on the website from Relato, but just wanted to share you in the next slide a couple of examples of what we get. So for example, the first graph is about if the people thinks that marine education is inclusive on their countries. So we can have a look about what they think, and the top numbers is the 5. So most of them are almost in the middle. So they think that is not at all, it's just in the middle. And it's the same with if they think what they think about gender gap on their countries in marine education. So it's the opposite. So most of them think that the marine education is almost, the gender gap is covered. So the next slide, please, is when you try to move with that kind of ideas to another places, it's like you have to start again and again to understand what's happening, to improve on your idea, on your methodologies to include Jedi. So last slide, please. So I think that I just want to give you this image where we are just volunteer to helping the people to learn more about the ocean, but at the same time working to make those connections to be sure that the Jedi ideas are being taken on the hand. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yolanda. I appreciate the messaging you've shared with regards to the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, the power of listening to understand what the people in that space need and the support that they're looking for to move things forward. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Kirsten Forsberg. She will be speaking to us about her work with Planeta Oceano in Peru. Here you go.
Thank you so much, Jay, and thank you, Dis, and thank you to all the organizers here. And it's a pleasure to be here. I think I'm also going to stand up like Francesca, because otherwise you're going to be seeing my back all the time. But I just want to first of all acknowledge, just like Yoli was mentioning, I think it's really important to acknowledge the privilege that we all have in being here, and I acknowledge that. And that's why, in the spirit of inclusivity, I want to give my presentation on behalf of the people that we work with and talk about them, right? Because it's really them, and they can't be here because they wouldn't be able to pay to be here, because they wouldn't even maybe have a visa in order to come here. So it's really important as we move forward with these discussions that we really question ourselves. How can we get these people here to the table? And I think that you've done an amazing job to have more people in, but we need to get that to the whole community, right? So starting with this, I'm going to start presenting some of the people that we work with. And in doing so, I also want to kind of give you a few examples and learning points of what we've seen work with equity, because just as Francesca mentioned, I think that these topics are coming up a lot and in an increased way, but there's still not a concrete how and trickling down. So we need to start talking about how we're really going to get this on the ground. So the people that you see there at the top corner are Dani and Ricardo and Mayreli. They are measuring sea turtles that were stranded in northern Peru several years ago. And these are fishermen, local students. Then you see Peter and his fisher colleagues that are measuring sea turtles that were caught on board. And it was with this citizen science data that later this fed a lot of local management plans as well, and understanding. The two girls at the bottom are the Asunción girls. They found the very first evidence of green turtle nesting in the country. And this, I think, recognizes this point that we can all create information that can lead to management. But the most important thing, and here's the first learning point for me in terms of how do we ensure justice and equity, and that's just by simply creating opportunities, by creating those spaces where people can act and fulfill their potential and give their voices. And so identifying those local leaders and giving power to those local leaders for me is the first thing in terms of equity. Next thing, please. Oh my goodness, I have the clock, so I have to hurry up. And then comes ownership, right? Second thing. And that photo, you can see Vitalia and Gilmer and Pilar and all these amazing teachers that we work with that came up with this Marine Educators Network of Northern Peru. And that's where the whole co-creation starts, in terms of not just going and telling the teachers, we want to talk about marine education, because we were seeing all these strandings and we obviously needed to do things, you know, for the ocean. But it was really a question of, what's going on in your school? What do we need? How can we build this together? We're here to support you. We're not here to tell you what to do. We want the ideas to come from you. And so through this, the Marine Educators Network of Northern Peru grew and expanded. And you can see that, again, inclusivity in terms of who is included, right? Kids that might not be included for parades, or that are on wheelchairs that are really made from plastic chairs. Like, we need everybody in the discussion, right? So that's the second thing in terms of ownership. And just think of it as if you were planting a plant, for example. Like, the first thing is the opportunity. You need where the plant is going to live, right? You need that space. Or if you're doing coral restoration, you need a space where you're going to restore the coral. The next thing is you want that to have its own opportunity to grow on itself. That's where the ownership comes in, right? They need to feel that. Everybody needs to feel. And in that center picture there, it was several years ago, I'm really proud of that picture. We applied to the National Environmental Citizenship Award in Peru. And Gilmer, who was the president of that network that we helped form, applied as well. And we both won as a tie. So it's not a, you know, beneficiary top-down thing. We're both in this together. Next one, please. Kind of on the same level, we have different youth that are working on their own environmental projects where they identify their own themes and work on these campaigns and connect between each other within our Connecting Schools program. Somebody that I would really want to highlight in this series of photos is Alfredo. He's a young student, started as an intern, started as a volunteer. You met him, Patricia. So these people are great, right? And Alfredo's gone out and, helped these youth develop their own youth projects. And what I always say, and going back to like being a volunteer, right? I love the fact that we can go and be a volunteer of our volunteers, and that we can be and being out in these youth-led projects and actually saying like they're the ones that are leading. Like I like, do you want more plastic bags? Do you want, where do you want me to put the coffee? Like we need to be the ones that are stepping back so that others can step in front, and that's where the whole ownership will come. Next one, please. Okay, so I talked about giving the space. I talked about giving that ownership and potential. The next thing for me is really bridging the gaps. And this is kind of like making sure that our plant has all the nutrients, that our coral reef restores has all the specific conditions. Up there, you'll see Edgardo, which is a fisherman that Elizabeth also met, and all his team of fishermen, that we're starting to do giant manta ray conservation and community-based ecotourism. And how do you connect the communities? So connecting with media. Okay, I'm almost connecting with media, right? And you see the reporter that's there, connecting with the schools, taking fishers to go out, talk to the kids. The kids get excited. They would start asking, Edgardo, how is your life out when you go and you fish? And then another one would ask, like, are you married, right? Like they're kind of like just asking stuff about curious things about the fishermen, and the kids are interacting. And then the politicians and the policymakers and the fishermen are interacting. And then we have this really cool experience when we went out and we tagged a giant manta ray. We found that it was migrating across the coast. And I mentioned this in a previous Ocean Literacy Dialogue session, and how we're connecting that scientific information with the classrooms as well. So it's really bridging those gaps, because if we give ownership, if we got opportunities, but we don't bridge the gaps between each other, we won't get to that justice and equity that we all really need. Next one, please. I promise I wasn't finishing. And then the last one is the growth stage. So really, what we ultimately need is an opportunity to grow. And when I talk about grow and scaling, as we know, there's different ways of approaching scaling. So you can scale up. We need to scale jetty approaches up globally. We need to also scale vertically, and we need to scale within, right? So it's making sure that each one of the people that we work with grow. And I'm really excited to mention how, for example, Ricardo, that started as a volunteer, has gone out and he works like for the regional government. Gilmer went to be a director of a local school, and so forth. And Mariano, who's like started as a volunteer, is now finishing his master's, going on to his PhD. So the thing is really committing on a very genuine way, because we all want to grow, and we all need to grow our efforts in terms of marine conservation, justice, equity, ocean literacy. It just makes us better human beings, right? So I think that that's at the end of it. It's just trying to think of the best way that we can do everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really appreciate the comments that you made highlighting the work with young folk, especially the intergenerational equity connection. That's a very necessary gap that needs to be bridged as well. So without any further ado and delaying, we've got two more speakers that we need to get to. Next up is Asha. Asha is an oceanographer and the founder of Oceans Well, and she hails here with us from Sri Lanka. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. I feel a lot of pressure because I've already said everything I have to say this morning at the keynote. And if you weren't at my keynote, then that's on you. But also, there's a lot of things that have already been said that were basically what's taken out of my mouth, right? So this is a bit of a tricky situation. But I want to talk a little bit about just a few other ideas around why we're not seeing representation, we're not seeing this equity and diversity and inclusivity in the spaces that we want people to be in. Like if we want to move forward with marine conservation, you all know that I have very strong feelings about how we need to be more diverse and inclusive. But just go back to the start of my story again. When I wanted to be a marine biologist at the age, by 17, I was like, I'm going to be a marine biologist. And literally everyone in Sri Lanka was like, are you crazy? What are you going to do with that degree? Right. And I mean, I don't know if you know where Sri Lanka is or if you've ever been there, but it's a beautiful tropical island surrounded by warm ocean. Right. But it's that lack of representation that made people feel like it wasn't a space that we belonged. We didn't have marine scientists, so people didn't have anyone to look at. We come from a South Asian culture where you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or a business person. That is your value. That's your social currency. That makes you more marriageable. Becoming a marine scientist is clearly not going to give you all of those opportunities. Also, in hindsight, I realized that people were very concerned because the only thing they could associate with a job in the marine environment was fishing. And they were like, you're going to go to university, study for years, and then you're going to come back and be a fisher person, right? Like that is literally what they were thinking. So that's where their mindsets were so narrow because of the lack of exposure, right? And because these are not things that were available to people like us. But I will say that today, but just through my work and just by being a visible face, right, and being very honest about my journey, today we have more Sri Lankans than ever before wanting to do marine science, right? So number one thing is representation, right? How do you create relationships with the ocean? You have to make sure people see themselves in the spaces around the ocean. And that is not a difficult thing. I'm really lucky. I feel like I get to live my best life. And while living my best life, I allow other people to live their best lives, right? It's a very simple thing for me. And then when you think about it, like another problem we have is a lot of people don't swim. Maybe 90% of Sri Lankans don't swim. This is not uncommon to in a lot of island nations, right? Our assumption is that if you live by the ocean, of course you go and indulge in the ocean every day and surf and scuba dive. These are very new, the idea of recreation around the ocean is a very Western concept, right? Historically, our cultures have used the ocean for economy, right? It's you go and you fish. Your office is a vessel, so you don't need to know how to swim because that boat's going to keep you safe. But of course, then they lose their friends at sea, and so then there are horror stories, right? And so this relationship with the ocean is a very fraught one. Even for fishermen. And so how do we build those relationships? How do we create that connection in a very different way? Because how on earth are we going to ask people to start caring for a space that they're afraid of, right? The ocean it's out there. It's just a big blue tank of water. And there are these dangerous creatures in there and people drown and die, right? If that's the narrative that people have, then how do we expect that connection with the ocean? And so there is a lot for me, it's like, how do we talk about, very much about education and curricula, but what about the simple task of swimming, right? How do we make swimming an integral part of everybody's existence? It's a survival tool in the end, right? It's not just about being competitive. It's about how do you stay alive? And swimming is a way for us to engage people and connect people with the ocean. So it's a little out there, but it's something we really need to start thinking about. And other experiences like in Sri Lanka, like I go and talk to schools just in the coastline where the blue whales are. They come really close in. I show them pictures of the blue whales and they're like, wow, where is this? Right? Like, I mean, that's what happens. A lot of tourism, right? So I have so many thoughts about this, but anyway, a lot of tourism is very exclusive, right? It's created for an outsider to come and indulge in and enjoy, but we do not create an equal space for the people locally. We price it so high because it's about income and revenue, but we do not think about how do we price it so it becomes accessible for the people who are living in those areas, who should jolly well have ownership and have the opportunity go see these creatures so that they can become stewards. Right. So tourism is a controversial thing. I think it's important in some ways, but it also can be something that creates boundaries for the local people in those areas. And we do need to rethink how we create that engagement in those spaces. And then what other opportunities can we create? Oh my God, I have 58 seconds. This is a very stressful situation here. So educational opportunities that are locally contextualized, right? So we try to make opportunities to engage. So we create internships and opportunities for people to participate in our science. So citizen science, for example, we had a massive marine disaster at the start of last year. A ship caught fire. All these little plastic noodles started like going, it's like floating out of out of the ship all across the island. People were frustrated because we were in a pandemic and we had very strict lockdowns. So they're stuck in their homes. They want to go out help, but they can't. And so we created this very simple tool online where they could report if they saw nurdles on their local beach. And that citizen science was really important for us to understand the distribution of the burnt nurdles, right? So creating those engagement experiences allowed people to start to engage with what had happened and actually look for the science of what had happened, rather than a lot of the pseudo science and, fake news that was kind of going around. But because they felt invested in, they felt like they were scientists, right? And then they got acknowledged in our papers. And so it became like a big thing. But also in terms of educational opportunities, we create stuff that's more locally contextualized, right? So teaching people about sea otters in Sri Lanka is like, what the heck, right? Like, what is that? And how do I care about it? But why do we try to look for local examples, at least in Sri Lanka, but also, so it's that relatability, right? How do we want people? We want people to go out on the coastline and be like, oh yeah, out here we have this, right? We had a southern elephant seal come to our shores, which was a really unusual experience. This probably for the elephant seal as well. All right. So you can imagine it was clearly lost. It came. And for me, it was like this amazing opportunity to create this connection, right? Because the people aren't seeing the creatures in the ocean unless they're dead, right? They see fish and that's what they engage with. But suddenly we had this giant live creature sitting on our beaches. And I would go every single day to whatever spot that it came up to, and I would answer questions, and people would just flock off the street. And they were just like, what is this thing? We don't even have a word for seals in Sri Lanka because in our local languages, because it is foreign, right? But that's that creating that availability and that space for people to actually like engage and try to understand. I think that's a responsibility that I take as well. And then translating our social media and outreach into local languages so that we're not just, talking to the people who have the opportunity to go on Google, but also just trying to infiltrate into the communities and provide them with equal opportunities to learn what we'll be able to teach, creating these grad programs and these pipelines, which I talked about this morning, but just making sure that local people see that they can stay in their own countries and continue to work on behalf of the ocean, but also have a long-term prospect, right? That's really important. We create a lot of people create internships. That's great, but those are really short. People pop in and out, and they don't feel like, oh, this space is cool, but like, what else do I do, right? So we have to always be thinking a few years ahead of, we brought them in, and now what else can we offer them until they have all the skills to sort of keep themselves in that ecosystem. And then also a cross-field, this is my last point, cross-field experience. I can see her whispering, I don't know what she's saying. But anyway, like, we bring in other people as well. So I'm a huge advocate of making sure that everybody feels that they're welcome. So I'll tell you, we have this one event that we run. It's a monthly discussion group. We haven't had it for a few months just because of the situation in Sri Lanka, but it's called Marine Conservation Conversations. And it's basically a science journal club for the public, right? We discuss scientific papers with people who are accountants, bakers, architects, business people, anybody who wants to come. We sit, we eat cake together, and we break it down, right? And for me, it's about how do we make sure that people know that science is for everyone. And there's lots of terrible science papers, so I definitely curate which papers we discuss, right? But it's also a different topic every month, so people are learning about different subjects. So it really is like, there are these amazing ways to create these experiences. We do a similar thing for under 15s called Ocean Hero Huddle. We have Ocean Hero Reels, where we empower young people to create videos on a topic of their choice. And all I do is I guide them, but I don't really like tell them what to do. And I will tell you, we've got some amazing stuff that's come out. We've created a couple of comic books about ecosystem engineers, right? Because those are fun, very colorful ways for people to engage with topics around the ocean that people will often tell them are too hard. Both books are about poop. So, there's a theme. And we also work with artists, right? I take artists on board my boats because I think it's important. They go off inspired and they start to create things for us that help us to connect with the ocean. And so there's lots of things here, and we do a hell of a lot more than just what I've told you, because the clock is now not ticking, but I know I have to stop. But the point is that if we want people to connect, we really need to start thinking outside the box. about who should be there, who should be allowed to connect, and how we connect them. And also just try to be really creative in understanding that, and everybody has something to offer. So that's really important for us to harness if we want to try to make a change.
Thank you, Asha. Representation, relationships, skill building, and relatability. Thank you very much for those strong reminders. And thinking of place and recognizing we have a friend with us in the virtual space. Mia will be our next speaker. Is it ready, Peg? Who's doing this? Good to go.
Are we all good?
Mia is situated in Cambridge Bay, so we're taking a virtual trip to the northern parts of Canada to join her today. Welcome, Mia.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm sure you're all happy to be down there in the warmer weather. We're up here in -50 right now, so. I just want to start off by thanking you all so much for being here, but also a huge thanks to the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, and especially Diz. I really appreciate her reaching out and asking me to be a part of this. I also just really want to say I don't have a presentation. I am not going to have a technical presentation. I'm sitting here with my blanket warming me up, and I'm a very relaxed. I'm gonna talk very personally, so I'm gonna take these quick 5 minutes to just talk about personal experiences I've had as an Indigenous youth in science and research. So my full-time job is, and I hope you can all hear me okay. My full-time job is a technical advisor for the Nunavut Impact Review Board. NIRB was created in 1999, and our mandate is to protect and promote the well-being of the environment and people of Nunavut through our impact assessment process. In October of this year, it'll be 7 years that I've been with NIRB, which is so crazy to me. And yeah, like I said, I'm just going to be talking about personal experiences for me, a lot of organizations and programs and projects that have worked out and seen the importance of diversity and inclusion. And I don't know, someone please wave their hand if I'm talking too much, because I am a talker. So please. So a few things that I've been involved in and some highlights that I just really like to talk about, and you know, again, organizations and programs that have done amazing jobs of inclusion and diversity. So I am a youth mentor for a program called Ikarvik, Barriers to Bridges. I started out as a youth participant 9 years ago, and now I'm a youth mentor in the program. It started out in Nunavut for Nunavut youth, but now we've expanded to other Indigenous communities all across Canada. We have done multiple youth workshops throughout the Arctic, talking to youth and getting their ideas of environmental issues in their communities, and just getting them to tell us what they'd like to do in the science and research world. And yeah, this program is to show Indigenous youth that they have the knowledge and the power to be involved in science and research in a meaningful way. Some other things that I've been involved in, I was a part of the Northwest Passage project as an early career scientist. I was a part of the year-long Ocean Bridge program in 2019. I was an Indigenous delegate at the Ocean OBS conference in Honolulu, Hawaii in 2019. And then just last year, I was also an Indigenous delegate at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, Portugal. And working with and showing Indigenous youth their power and their strength is a passion of mine. Of course, so is public speaking. I love sharing my knowledge. I love just speaking in general. I love traveling. I love doing all of that, but a huge passion of mine is just showing Indigenous youth the things that they're able to do, like what I'm doing now at this huge conference. So that's a huge passion of mine. So and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm giving this presentation. I hope to either motivate other, Southern researchers and scientists, but also if there's other youth watching, showing them that they can do, if they have the motivation and the strength, and that they can do this as well. Equity, diversity, and inclusion are important in all aspects, but to have diversity and inclusion in Arctic science and research is so important. And I know not just to me, but to so many youth all over the Canadian or all over the Arctic in general. And I just want to end with a quote that a really good friend of mine, who is also a youth mentor in this Iqaluit program, what he said was that Inuit are the original Arctic scientists. We have made observations and have had knowledge and gathered data for thousands of years. And the more the scientific world understands that, the better we can all work together for a brighter future for the ocean. So I just want to say thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you, Mia. What a powerful quote to end on. What a very powerful quote to end on. Thank you very much. We're now heading into the question and answer period. And I know we have our friends out in the World Wide Web that might have some questions to contribute. And we'll look to the virtual audience for questions, as well as any questions that are in the room. How much time? I'd just like to do a time check before. Wait, 5 minutes. So let's work with who's in the room with us right now while we get a moment to check online to see if there's any questions. Are there any questions in queue for us? We have one. And where is our friend dialing in from there?
Not sure where they're dialing in from, but their name is Mo. Question is, do any of the speakers have insights on the gender gaps and including beyond the binary genders? For example, what are the statistics of trans people in marine and ocean conservation spaces and those who hold power and management or director positions?
Oh, what a nice way to start. Thank you for that question, Mo. Who among us on our panel would like to take this question?
They're coming in from Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia. Hello, East Coast. Thank you for that.
I'm not really going to answer, but I just want to ask this, if we can invite Mo for the next panel we organize, because I think that we really need to include. I didn't recognize any project that has been so inclusive, but for sure that it should be somewhere, someplace, so we need to find it and highlight it. So I don't know if someone has any.
Mo, this is something we are committed to work on, so you'll probably be hearing from us because we do have your contact information from registration. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that might have a question that they'd like to pose to our panel?
I just want to say thank you, first of all, great panel. I really liked when you were talking about the idea of ownership and like taking projects forward. And I think that again touches on when you see yourself represented, you're more likely to take ownership of that. And so I wanted to ask questions for you guys, particularly when you're starting community-based projects. What are some strategies to get local leaders to take ownership? Because oftentimes, right, you see projects that like are so good, and then as soon as the person leading them leaves, they just die. So what are some strategies that you've sort of figured out?
Thank you so much. I mean, I think the key thing of ownership is the ownership has to start from the beginning, right? It can't be an idea from outside. It really has to build that from the beginning. So we've done a lot of work and going back to what I think, Asha, you were mentioning in terms of listening, right? Going out and asking, what challenges are you facing? What are you interested in? What are you? And so you serve as a support to that, right? So that way, that person takes ownership from the beginning because it was their idea since the beginning. They were just supported along the way, right? Beyond that, of course, this type of work is extremely challenging, right? So I do think that that's where the power of bridging gaps and networks comes in which you develop that. But I honestly can't find a way where you might find successful ownership if you don't have that ownership since the straight beginning. I mean, otherwise it's challenging. The idea, it has to come from the ideation phase, and it has to be a horizontal communication with everybody and just genuinely listening on that level. I mean, we develop friendships with everybody, right? Like the fishers are our friends, the kids are our friends. Like for me, like today was just like a crazy day. I'm like, what's upping, my fisherman friend, and then what's upping my like minister friend, right? Like it's literally bridging those gaps. Yeah.
If I may, thank you. Is she, Mia, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I see you and I see your hand. Would you like to take the mic?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add a couple things, if you don't mind, to answer that.
Please proceed.
Yeah, I have a quick answer and a little bit of a longer answer. The quick answer is Iqaluit has actually come up with a recommendation document for exactly that. We have created this document for Southern researchers to work with communities, and exactly like you were just saying, it's working with the communities from the very beginning, working with them like while you're in the communities, and then working with them afterwards as well. This is my longer explained document or explanation, but there is a document. If you want to search Iqaluit, Ikaarvik, Iqaluit, we have a document that just in a non-technical way explains to researchers how to work with communities and how to keep that connection. Because I know this, for a lot of Southern researchers think it's hard to keep that connection or hard to stay in contact, but really if you do it from a genuine standpoint, if you want to learn from the community. And I think one thing that's always missed is that you have to come into the communities human first. We're all human. We're not always scientists. We're all human. Tell them how many siblings you have. Make a connection with this community so that they know you want to be there and that you want to connect with them. That's always, anyways, the short version is you can research the document, and there's recommendations for before, during, and after your research.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mia. And then Asha?
So I think all of this is very important. I think the trust is really important before you can create these projects. But in some situations, you may not have the time to create the trust. So if there's that investment time, because in the face of a disaster, right? For example, in COVID, during the first lockdown, we were very concerned about what was happening with the small scale fishes across the island. And we needed to do that research, but we didn't necessarily have projects around the island, so we couldn't go into those spaces. So we actually recruited all our research assistants are local to those areas. Many of them have parents who are fishers in those communities. So those people already have that access because they are part of those communities. So that's another way to sometimes get into those communities to get that information. And then, of course, the important part is going back and relaying that information back so that they don't feel exploited, because a lot of these communities get exploited and mined for data and information, and they don't know what's happening with that. And so that makes them really unhappy. So I think sometimes in some situations, you don't have that time, but there are other strategies that you can use to make sure that those local people are empowered, and now we have this network of young researchers across the island who we tap into for all kinds of projects as a result as well.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions online? And any questions in the room? Yes, please take the microphone. Thank you.
Hello,
Hello.
my name is Patricia. I'm from Brazil. It's not exactly a question, but just to share something I was taught after things you all have said about how to include people from the global south in the events that take place in the global north. It's always a question of thinking how to bring to the place where things go on. But why not to think, is there any possibility for organizations from the global north that maybe partner with organizations from the global south and organize events there in order to be really more inclusive, so that people cannot spend all that money to come here or don't have problems with the visa and other facilitations? So it was more a provocation. I was thinking of that. How could we partner in this way too? Thinking how to be inclusive, not waiting for them to come to our houses, talking about here, but how maybe try to partner and even do something. And from here, you could travel down the globe.
Thank you, to disrupt the status quo of how we do things. Excellent. In the interest of time, are we at our time at this point? If you can just indulge me for a short minute, I want to go back to the question that brought us here together today, because it starts the research that is done will inform policies that follow to create a more inclusive and equitable space for the ocean literacy research that's happening. So if we think about the question that brought us here, how can we, and I'm including everyone in this room as interested actors and stakeholders here, how can we as a global ocean literacy community, how can we ensure justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion remain central to our research? And if you had one hope, wish, dream that you're working towards with that, how can we, if you could share that with us? And in the spirit of just reciprocity, I'm going to start with Mia, since she's the furthest from us. And did you hear that question, my friend?
Sorry, could you just say it again,
You
please?
think about how can we as the global ocean literacy community ensure that justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion remain central to our research? What is one thing or wish or hope that you would carry forward from this talk today?
I think just education, whether it be educating yourself about equity, educating yourself about, climate change in the Arctic, educating yourself on, just learning more, whether it be about ocean literacy or anything. It's just being able to have that open mindset of continuing and knowing that you want to keep diversity and inclusion in your work that you're doing every day. That same motivation to educating others as well is I think really important.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you.
Pass it down.
Okay. So I absolutely support what Mia says, and in case that you have money, hire someone who can do it for you. Like if you just bring someone who really know about that topics to your team. So that's going to be so for in my case more powerful to have someone who all the time can teach me about it, but also have a look on the projects to be sure that everything is going on the way that should be.
I would add that a lot of the stuff that's being developed is often developed in English. And as I said this morning, I mean, just because we pretend that it's the official language, it's not. So we should be committing to translating everything into as many languages as possible, which means creating a budget for the translation. So very often translation happens by volunteers, and that's not okay. It is a big burden, and so on those people, and so we should be looking at all our budgets to include money to translate into local languages. So we are creating more access and making it all more equitable because everybody's getting access to the same things?
I would say questioning ourselves in our day-to-day actions, just making sure that every single thing that we do, how are we engaging others? How are we engaging others in decision-making, in giving their voice? How are we encouraging others and empowering others? And having this idea that it's not us and them, right? Having this idea that we're a joint global community. So I think that having that mindset as we wake up, as we go to sleep, will just change the way that we're doing things. I just want to take the quick opportunity really quickly to invite you. This is obviously an incredible topic and a very complex topic that we should definitely continue talking about. If you may, I just wanted to invite people to the next session. We're going to be hosting another session tomorrow for those that are here in Vancouver, unfortunately, on equity again. And I've left a few little flyers at the end in case you guys want to continue with the discussion, because I think that that's also a very important thing. We can't just have this as a one-off conversation. We have to continue making sure that this is trickled down to our entire community. So thank you.
So my wish is that we don't need to discuss this anymore. This is my big wish, because also I've been talking a lot about this natural sciences, social sciences, and my wish is always we don't have to talk about this anymore, because it should be normal to to have this more inclusive. But my goal, and going back to what Asha was saying about translation, is also to work more with people with disabilities. And this is something that I'm starting to work. So developing ocean literacy tools for deaf people, for blind people. And I think, there are some very interesting projects, but it's really starting. And I really would like to continue to work more on this topic, because I think it's really key and not talked about a lot.
Thank you so much. Ensuring that accessibility is accessibility for all. Wonderful. Before we close off, I'd like to give my deep gratitude to those who are online. We can't see you, but we do appreciate you participating. And just for the panel to know that Mia, the whole time each of you were sharing, her head was nodding in agreement. So I was watching and making sure I wanted to share that with you. To the audience in-house, please do consider joining us again tomorrow, February the 7th. We have 2 sessions happening, one at 4 about ocean literacy and the sustainable blue economy, and a second one at 5:30, ocean literacy as a policy tool. You can register, those who are online, you can also register online for these events as well. And I think that brings us to a close, and I'm going to hand the mic over to nobody, and good night. Mia. Thank you, Mia.
Thank you all so much. I really do appreciate it.